DreAllDay.com.
Gentlemen, you're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves anyone out there, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together in the one bundle, one philosophy, one mindset, one method, this masterclass right here that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's episode, this is, if you've seen the title, maybe the very reason, maybe the only reason why you are even listening to this. That fact is not lost on me with some of you. This is not the normal episode of this show. As everyone knows, especially if you live in the United States, especially if you're a person of color, and actually, especially even if you're not, especially if you live in the USA, you know that there is a big situation that has been brewing in the United States over the last week. And I'm not talking about COVID-19, I'm talking about the death of one George Floyd, an African-American man who was, what it looks like, murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota on Monday, May the 25th. The video of what happened to George Floyd, if you haven't seen the video, you can look it up, or if you use Instagram or Facebook, I'm sure someone you know posted that video. In the video, this gentleman, this police officer, Derek Chauvin, is kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, and George Floyd can be heard saying that he can't breathe. He's saying that he's vocally letting the officer know that it's uncomfortable for him having that officer's knee on his neck. And this officer's not a tiny guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he's not a tiny guy. A fully grown man putting their knee and the entire weight of their body on the back of your neck. Anyone who's listening to this right now is probably gonna be pretty uncomfortable for you. Uncomfortable enough for George Floyd that he stopped breathing. He was pronounced dead by the time he got to the hospital, and might have died right there on the scene. But by the time they looked at him, it was a little bit later, he was pronounced dead. Now, we know many things have happened since then, and I haven't even gotten into my points yet, but George Floyd, the video of what happened, because everybody has phones now, so luckily we can see what has actually happened. This is not the first time this has happened to someone, a person of color in the United States, by a police officer, especially a white police officer, but we got the footage. Everybody has seen it. I did not watch the entire footage. I've heard that the entire video that someone has posted is 8 to 10 minutes. I've only seen about 20 to 30 seconds of it, but I saw the part that I need to see. I've read enough articles about it and obviously heard and seen all the noise that's been going on social media, with everyone offering their opinions and things being said by a lot of different people, from anonymous individuals who nobody knows to the people with the highest positions in the United States government. And we're gonna address all of that here today. And the thing is, that video went viral. I believe it might've been Tuesday or Wednesday, a day or two after it happened. The video began to go viral. People found out that this man passed away. Then it was a day or two after that, because I remember I was doing an Instagram live. I don't remember which day this was this past week. Maybe it was Tuesday or Wednesday. I was doing an Instagram live. Someone asked me a question, because I always answer questions in a live, about what I thought of what happened to George Floyd. And I said, obviously, it's wrong. The man lost his life. So whatever he was doing, he wasn't threatening the life of the cop, which means if he ends up dead, that means the cop, or cops, plural, went too far. Now, if he threatened the life of the cop and then the cops killed him, then maybe you have a conversation there. There's some nuance there you could debate. But if he wasn't threatening the life of the police officer, whatever the officer needed to do to subdue that man, or any individual who the police need to subdue, because we know that that is part of the job of the cops. And I'm going to get into all of this from both sides. Please don't make a judgment till you hear everything I have to say here. If they did that and this man ends up dead, obviously somebody did something wrong. I said this on my Instagram a day or two after it happened, and people were asking me. They just wanted to see what I said, because I'm active on social media. But one thing that I want to say before I even get into my points here is, for anyone who knows me, you know that if I'm going to speak on a certain subject, something that maybe you think everyone has a certain consensus opinion on it, I'm probably going to tell you something that's a little bit different from what, quote, everybody, close quote, is saying. And if there's a situation where maybe everyone, quote unquote, everyone thinks that there's a certain way to address that topic or a certain way to think about a certain thing, I'm going to say something that's a little bit different from that, maybe radically different from that. And I'm not saying it to be a contrarian on purpose. I'm saying it because what I've always learned, what I've always thought, always believed, is that if you don't have something to say that's going to improve on the silence or improve on what has ever been said, what has already been said, then what the hell are you speaking for? And I usually don't even offer anything when it comes to these situations when some type of racial tension-based situation happens, because we don't always know exactly what's going on. And I'm already stepping on my points here, but I want to make sure that those of you who know me, you know that I'm not going to just give you the regular say what you could already read on an Instagram caption, because otherwise I wouldn't need to be recording this. I wouldn't be recording it if that's all I had to offer you. And for those of you who have never heard of me, you do not know who I am, you are only listening to this or watching this because somebody you know or somehow this got to you and you want to see what the hell this guy's going to be talking about, understand I'm not going to be repeating what you've already seen on Twitter or in Instagram captions, because I think, as I said, I believe if that's all I had, then I wouldn't be recording right now. I got a lot of other things I could be doing with my time. I'm recording this on Saturday, May the 30th, by the way, just in case anything changes or anything comes out after the point of this recording, you know why. Now, let's get into our points. I got 7 points I'm going to share here with you today. I want to make sure that I'm explaining everything clearly, articulately, and I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to make sure that we understand every side of every opinion that I've seen so far, that I've heard. I'm going to make sure every side of every opinion is addressed. Even though some of you right now may be emotionally charged and say, well, or we don't need to hear the opinion of this person or that person. Or we don't care what the cops might think or what the president might think or what some white people who never experienced racism might think. Well, we do need to address it. And when I get through my points, you're going to understand why we need to address that as well. Even though they are not the victim and they are not kin or nor do they look like the victim, we still need to address it. And you'll understand exactly why we need to address it as we get into the show today. So point number one, I don't need to tell you all again what the topic is. So point number one, I don't ever react to these things when these videos come out or some viral clip goes viral of something happening between people of different races, especially things with the cops, or if a black person gets beat up, even a black person being killed. Now, granted, I haven't had it to happen to anybody in my family. I haven't had it happen to anybody that I know. So I won't even say I may. I definitely would respond differently if it was somebody that I knew that it happened to. I probably would immediately say something. I would immediately react. I would be posting. I would be vocal. But it hasn't happened to me. That hasn't happened to anyone close to me in my life, luckily, and hopefully it never does. So given that, I don't ever react to these things because often we don't get the whole story of exactly what happened until much later. We don't get all of the facts as quickly as we get the viral video, as quickly as we get the blurb, right? The 280 character news piece that people start reacting to and talking about without even having 100% of the information. Me, I'm an information individual. All right, I don't get stuck on information. I don't paralyze myself through analysis, but I'm an information individual. So before I start speaking on a certain subject, I want to make sure I got my shit together mentally. Make sure that I know what the hell I'm talking about, and make sure that if I do offer an opinion or a judgment or a perspective, and that opinion, perspective, or judgment is challenged, I have some material with which to back up my argument. That's just the type of person that I am. And if you ever have listened to any of my material, you would understand that. You understand that when I record this show right here, or I do a live stream, or even a caption on Instagram, I like to make sure I give people I want to make sure I give you some depth. I want to give you some meat as to why I'm saying what I'm saying. I can make a statement in 140 characters, 280 characters, just like anybody else, but I like to back up my statement with the reasoning behind why I think how I think. Because, again, I want you to understand where it's coming from. Not just understand what I said, but understand why I said it. And this is why, I do what I do for a living, because this is the way that I think, and this is the way that I explain things to other people. So it does not mean, with all this being said, since we only get the viral part that spreads at first when something like this happens, I want everyone to understand, if you're a person who is watching this from the outside looking in, and even though I am a person of color, so I can understand how a person of color right now could feel afraid, could feel nervous, could feel like helpless, because you have no idea what would happen if you're the one who has an altercation with police officers. I can understand that. I've had conversations with police officers, interactions, we'll say, with police officers in my life. Some of them super positive, some of them neutral, some of them somewhat negative, but nothing close to what has happened to George Floyd. And hopefully I never will. And I do not have any children. So any of you who has children, especially young black men who are seen more often as threats, I think, in the eyes of people who are not of color, I understand you maybe have a completely different perspective from what I have, or at least a somewhat different perspective from what I have here. And those of you who are, again, I'm talking about people on the outside looking in. So you may be on the inside if you're a person of color, or you have kin who is a male person of color, especially somebody with some size on them, who, again, just by sheer size may look like more of a threat because you're 6'5" than a person who's 5'5". All right, that's just how it works in the animal kingdom. And human beings at our core, we are animals. And those of you who are on the outside looking in, I want to make sure you listen to everything I'm saying here today too. And I want to explain to you why. Because there are some people on the outside looking in, people who are not of color, who are seeing what's happening on TV. They heard what happened to George Floyd, and maybe you think, well, maybe you think he deserved it for whatever reason. We're going to address that. Maybe you think he didn't deserve it and you think it was wrong. But then you're looking at what's going on the news, and you're seeing that people are protesting in all these different cities. There are riots going on. People are destroying buildings, looting businesses, burning down establishments. And you're wondering, what the hell is wrong with these people? We're going to address that as well. And I want to make sure I'm saying it up front. The people who do react, the people who did react, the people who did go to Twitter and Instagram and get hashtags going and got their hoodies on and their t-shirts and have said things and made statements, and they have made their own podcast episodes and videos and live streams or whatever about this, they're not wrong for reacting. All right, I made it clear that I'm not a person who reacts, and I explained to you why I don't react, but I'm not saying that the people who did react are wrong. I'm not saying that you're incorrect. I'm not saying that you lack the right information. I'm not saying you're unqualified, because everyone has a right to respond however they want to respond to how things happen. I personally, again, I'm speaking for myself here. You should know that because it's my show. I have had time to process what's been going on and looked at the information I've taken in, at least the parts that I think I can trust. And I want to make this statement. This is going to be my statement on this whole situation, because people have been asking me about it. And I see a lot of people are doing a lot of barking, not at me, but just barking online and things like that on this subject. My aim here today, as I said at the beginning, is to improve on the silence or add some substance to what has already been said. And if I fail to do that, then I want anyone who is listening to this to let me know. All right, you know how to reach me. Point number 2. Let's establish a ground rule right off top. All right, I mean, we're 15 minutes in. We're going to establish this ground rule right off top. Anyone who's listening to my voice right now, if you personally, I'm not talking about your group, your family, I'm saying you personally, if you do not know the feeling of seeing a police officer and immediately knowing upon laying eyes on that cop and that cop laying eyes on you, when you make eye contact with that cop, if you have never felt that if that police officer decides, not has to, not is forced to, but decides to address you in any way, shape, or form, and you know that that could immediately become a situation, if you don't know that feeling, your job at this point is to shut the fuck up and listen. If you don't know what it feels like to be pulled over by a police officer and think to yourself, okay, if this cop is having a bad day, if I move the wrong way, if I say the wrong thing, if I look at him the wrong way, if he just has to stick up his ass for whatever reason, this could end up a situation that could get me in something that I won't be able to get out of. So this would get me in a situation that could alter my life. If you don't know what that feels like, your job today is to shut the fuck up and listen. And your job moving forward every day when it comes to situations like this is to shut the fuck up and listen. As the saying goes, if you haven't walked a mile in another man's shoes, you are unqualified to judge that man. So any of you, so this, what happened here with George Floyd is a situation, it was an interaction that became an altercation between a black man and a white police officer. Now, we're addressing specifically the one police officer, Derek Chauvin, who had his knee on George Floyd's neck at the moment that the life left George Floyd's body. Okay, the other 3 police officers, I'm not sure exactly what their race is or their background. We're talking specifically about this one guy. okay? The one cop that had his knee on the neck, the one cop who had the damn National Guard surrounding his house because they knew this guy was in a position of, peril after that happened and people found out his name and where he lived, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody who's listening to this, if you don't know what that feels like, if you are a female, especially if you are not a person of color, if you are not a person of color, male or female, if you are not black, male or female, you don't know this feeling. All right, you don't know the feeling that when a police officer speaks to you, no matter what they say, how they say it, why they say it, where they say it, that if you say the wrong thing that sets that cop off, you could end up in a life-altering situation. You don't know that feeling. You haven't been there. All right, if you're a Latin person, but you're like a light-skinned Latin person, you kind of look white until we hear you talk, all right, you don't know this feeling. If you are a European, I mean, you're not a quote-unquote American white, but you're from Europe, and you wouldn't know it till you started talking, you don't know this feeling. If you are not a person of color, you don't know this feeling, which means when it comes to these issues of the interaction between the police and a black man, your job is to shut the fuck up and listen. And I think we've established that clearly here. In the essence of fairness, I'm gonna make sure I address whatever you may be feeling too. Those of you who are not people of color, those of you who are white, those of you who have never lived in urban America around a bunch of black people and never seen up close the kind of interactions that happen between police and people of color, and you don't quite understand why do people of color feel like they are being, why do people say, well, we're being hunted and we're being killed by police when, I mean, it's not like every single day somebody's dying from police. And this, again, I'm saying what you might be thinking. Now, I may be wrong about this. You can correct me. You might be thinking to yourself, all right, well, yeah, we hear the stories when a black person gets killed by a cop, but it's not like it's happening every day. It's not like everybody's getting killed by the cops. It's not like the cops are just walking around just shooting every black person they see. Why are black people saying these things? Why are they using this hyperbole? Why are people getting so worked up when it happens to one person? But look, there are millions of you who are alive every single day. You pass by cops, they don't kill you. Why are you saying these things? We're going to address that here today as well. And those of you who feel like there's no need to address that, you're going to understand why we need to address that, again, as we get deeper into this and further into this conversation. I'm going to address the points of anyone who's listening to this right now, whether you are on the extreme of a person of color or you are, I guess we could say, in support of people of color saying it's crazy what happened to George Floyd and it needs to stop and it shouldn't happen. If you're on that end, or if you're on the other end where you're saying things like, I believe it was Tommy Lauren on Twitter, I saw this, somebody posted it, and Trump said something about they were using the word thugs, and they were talking about the riots and the protesting and how people were getting violent and the National Guard coming in and things like that. If you're on that end, the whole further end of the spectrum, and you're wondering why people would do that, you understand that somebody passed away, you understand people are pissed, but you're wondering why people are reacting the way they're reacting, you're on that end of the spectrum, I'm gonna address both ends. And anybody who's in between, you will be addressed as well. Okay. Now I want to be clear for anyone who is not a person of color. Years ago, I was watching this Chris Rock comedy special, and some of you remember this. Chris Rock was making a joke about, something that comedians do all the time. At least back then they were. I don't know how much nowadays is the conversation kind of shifted, but he was making a joke about race. He was making a black people, white people joke, and those jokes work. All right, and Chris Rock's pretty funny. I remember Chris Rock was saying this. He was like, I don't remember what the build up to the joke was. You can go find it yourself. And I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. Look it up. He said, there's no white person in this audience. He's on stage doing his speech. There's no white person in this audience who would trade their life with mine right now. And I'm rich. He said, I got money. Listen, who listening to this right now? Those of you who are fans of mine, you've been subscribed to me for a while. How many of you who's white, who's not black, how many of you would trade your life for mine right now? Let me sell myself to you. I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall. I'm black. I'm athletic. I'm in great shape. I could run 8 miles outside without stopping. I got a pretty girlfriend. I've written 26 books. I own my own business. I got this show that comes out every day. I think I'm a pretty smart guy. Would you trade your life for mine right now? Not one of you would. And I saw this video where this woman was saying, I don't even know who the woman was. And she said, she was talking to an audience of white people. And she said, if there's anyone in here who is white who would like to be treated by the cops the same way black people get treated by the cops, stand up. And nobody stood up. Everybody was just completely silent. And I'm making this point to explain to you this, giving you those examples to explain to you this. Since you wouldn't trade lives with me, you wouldn't trade lives with Chris Rock, you don't want to be treated by the cops the way black people get treated by the cops, you would not trade with any of us. That is you implicitly, tacitly letting yourself and everyone else know that you know there is a clear difference between the interactions that the police have with people of color and people who are not of color. Or white people, we'll just say that. We're gonna say you don't have any color, white's a color, right? There's a clear difference. And because you wouldn't trade lives with Chris Rock, who's rich, you wouldn't trade lives with me, who's a great athlete, and I've written these books and I got this resume, you wouldn't trade lives with me, and you don't want to be treated by the cops the way black people get treated by the cops, that means you know there's a difference. Now, how much of a difference you think that is, or whether it's good or bad, or whatever reasoning you have for why you wouldn't trade is not the question yet. We're gonna get into that. But you know there is a difference. And if I'm wrong, you can let me know. My email is dre@dreallday.com, just in case you didn't know how to reach me. So now that we have that ground rule established, since you don't know what it feels like, and you don't want to experience what it feels like, your job, white people, is to shut the fuck up and listen. Point number 3. We can all agree that the police officers, all 4 of them, I believe it was 4 according to the reports, we can all agree that they did too much in this situation. Is there anyone who disagrees with that point? The police officers did too much. I said this when I was initially asked a question on Instagram Live a couple days, or the day that the video went viral, right? Somebody asked me about it, and I said, I'm not gonna make a statement yet because I don't have all the information. I haven't really gathered my thoughts. I don't know if I'm gonna say anything, but I said one thing we are sure of is the cops went too far. They did too much, because here are a couple reasons why we know they did too much. As I said already, George Floyd, no one's arguing that George Floyd threatened the police. He was not a threat to the lives of the officers. And I'm not a police officer, but if there are any who are listening to this, I believe you are trained to know that if you pull that gun, you are shooting to kill. And if you use deadly force, it's not using deadly force to threaten somebody, using deadly force to kill somebody. And you only use deadly force if you absolutely have to. You pull a gun because the other guy's got a gun, or you use deadly force because deadly force may be used against you. George Floyd, from what we've seen in the video, and even from the, I believe from any reports that those officers would give, there is no way, shape, or form any of those cops could say, we were physically threatened by this guy, so that's why we had to do what we did that ended up with this guy losing his life. And we know because the mayor of Minneapolis immediately went over the head of the police chief, whoever that is in Minneapolis, and fired those 4 officers without even talking. I don't know if he even consulted the police chief. He just said, these dudes are gone, they're out. Now they got fired from their job. Now I'm sure someone listening to this has been fired from their job before. I've been fired from a job before. You do something you ain't supposed to do, the boss decides you don't work there anymore, you get fired from a job, it's over. You go get another job, right? But if you do something you're not supposed to do and somebody loses their life, okay, now that's not just something happening. That's not just you being short on the register. That's not just you cussing out a customer. That's somebody lost their life. Somebody being short on the register or cussing out a customer are not crimes. I mean, unless somebody's threatening you with embezzlement, but you get what I'm saying. Somebody losing their life, that's a crime. All right, there's something has to happen there, which means these police officers need to be charged. I said that on Wednesday of last week. Now we know those police officers, or the main guy with the knee on the neck, Derek Chauvin, he has been charged with, I believe it was 3rd-degree manslaughter and 2nd-degree, I have it written down here. I'll get to that when we get there in a minute. The official autopsy, this is what I heard today, just reading about what I was reading, listening to some things. The official autopsy done by the examiner's office in Minneapolis, this is what they said. They said there are no signs of strangulation or asphyxiation from George Floyd. They said his death was not by strangulation or asphyxiation. You don't know what asphyxiation means. It means a lack of ability to breathe. They said he did not die from that. They said that the death must have been, or may have been, caused by some intoxicants in this guy's body, because according to the story that I read, George Floyd, He went into a store. I didn't even say that. I should have said this at the beginning. He went into a corner bodega type place, bought some cigarettes and paid for it with a counterfeit bill. And then the guy who worked at the store, this is a teenage kid who worked at the store. He called the cops when he realized that he had accepted a counterfeit bill. And the cops came and George Floyd was still sitting in the car outside of the bodega. Why he was still sitting there, who knows? And they said he had passengers in the car. So I don't know who those people were who were in the car. I would love to hear from those individuals. And the guy at the store who called the cops said this guy, who ended up being George Floyd, he seemed to be kind of drunk or inebriated. Maybe that's why he wasn't driving the car, but he had drove the car to the spot. So however he got there, he got there. He was still sitting in the car when the cops arrived. And the guy at the store, in whatever solace we can take from this, he said he felt bad once he saw what happened and he saw the way the cops came and what happened, because he was only calling the cops because it was protocol. That if he was taught, he was trained that if you get a counterfeit bill from somebody, you call the cops. That was how he was trained. He was a teenager. He was just doing what he had been taught. So he wasn't trying to get George Floyd in trouble. Again, according to his statement. I haven't heard him. I haven't seen him. I don't know how much anybody accepts that or whatever. I have no other judgments. This is what I read from this person. All that being said, this whole autopsy report that says there's no signs of strangulation or asphyxiation is super duper questionable. I'm not going to say they're lying. I'm not even going to say that it's bullshit. I'm just going to say it's very questionable, which means there are a lot of questions to be answered. And I've also heard that George Floyd's sister, she said the family is going to do their own independent investigation into what caused George Floyd's death, because there's no way they can just accept, all right, so how is he dying? I mean, I've never heard of somebody, actually I can't say I never heard of it, but I very rarely, how many of you have heard of somebody dying because they were drunk? And let's say he was drunk and high. How many people have heard of somebody dying because they were drunk and high? So he was, whatever level of intoxicated George Floyd was, it was enough that he was able to operate that vehicle from wherever he was to drive up to that bodega, right? He had to have operated the vehicle to get to that spot. So then he dies and they say it had nothing to do with his air being cut off. So how was that? He was drunk enough that whatever level of drunk he was, let's just assume that he was drunk. We don't even know. Let's just assume he was drunk, right? He was drunk enough to get the car there. I've seen people drive drunk, all right? So that's possible, but they didn't die. And then they pulled him out of the car. He has his handcuffs on. In the video that we see when he's standing up and he's turning his head and he's communicating with the cop, you see he's saying something to the cop and it looks like he's trying to plead his case, like for the cops to just let him be. And all right, he wasn't that drunk. I mean, as drunk as he was enough to know what was going on. He knew he was being handcuffed. He knew he was talking to cops. He knew he was trying to talk his way. It looked like he was trying to talk his way out of those cuffs, which I get. That he didn't want to go to jail. Who wants to go to jail? Nobody. So he wasn't that drunk. It's not like he was falling over himself or he was falling asleep. You know how some people get so drunk they fall. He wasn't any of that. So how could that level of intoxication, this is the point that I'm making, how could that level of intoxication be enough for a person to just die 10 minutes later? That makes no fucking sense whatsoever. That's super questionable. So the family's going to do their own independent investigation and they're going to come out with whatever information they find, but that just doesn't add up in any way, shape, or form. Either way, we know that the cops made mistakes here. That's why they got fired, right? The mayor went straight to firing those guys from their job, which means they got fired, meaning they did something wrong and somebody's dead, which means they got to be charged with they got to face a criminal charge, which did subsequently happen. Even if you, who is listening to this right now, you think that those police officers were within their job duty. Let's say that you think, maybe there's a cop listening to this right now. And I'm not a cop, so any of you who is a cop, you can let me know. The training for police, I'm just going to go off of what I can reasonably assume here. And if I am grossly incorrect in this, anyone who's a cop, please check me. The training for police, I'm going to reasonably assume, says, all right, you arrest the person, you let them know that they're under arrest, you put the cuffs on them, and if they are resisting, then you are allowed, as a police officer, you're allowed to use some force to restrain that person, to make them do what you need them to do. Make them get in the car, make them stop squirming or kicking or fighting back or whatever they're doing. You're allowed to use some type of force against them. And if they use any force against you, you're allowed to do something back. They hit you, you're allowed to hit them back, all right? If they try to fight you, you're allowed to beat their ass. And any of you who ever gets into a situation with a cop, don't try to fight a cop. All right? Even if you think you could beat that cop, there are more cops on the way. You won't beat them all. But anyway, George Floyd didn't do any of that. He appeared to be, according to what I've read, that he was resisting, but he was resisting like the things he was saying. He was resisting in that they said when they pulled him out of the car with they had the handcuffs on him, that he wouldn't stand up because they were trying to walk him to the back of the car, and he wouldn't stand up. So he was like falling down on purpose so that they couldn't get him into the police car. This is what they said. All right, I can't verify that, but this is what the police report said according to the New York Times. So then this is what they said. This is a little jump in the story that doesn't make sense to me. They said they had him in the car. He was in the back of the squad car, but then for whatever reason, they took him out of the squad car. And then they had him laying down on the ground because maybe he was resisting so much even once he was in the car that they felt like he was unruly. I don't know. This part I'm just trying to figure out. So they took him out of the car. That's when they laid him on the ground. That's when you see 3 police officers kneeling on top of him. It was one on his legs, one on his back, and one on his neck. All right, that was the 3 cops on him. Then eventually the other 2 cops were off of him, I believe. And then the last officer, Derek Chauvin, the murderer, he's the one who the video went viral where you see him. You can see his face. There's someone standing right in front of him, letting him know, like, yo, dude is saying he can't breathe. We can hear him on camera saying he can't breathe. And obviously the officer is right there on top of him. He can hear the guy saying he can't breathe. And there are people who are standing around like, yo, he can't breathe. You're on his neck. And the dude just would not move. Now, this is what I said when I was answering this question on my IG Live last week. I think that officer, Derek Chauvin, I think he was kind of what we call, psychologically speaking, I would think he was kind of in a zone at that time. Now, some of you may know the zone as being like playing sports when you can't miss a 3-pointer. But the zone is when you get into a state in your mind where you are not consciously thinking. You're not using your cognitive functions. You're doing the thing that you're doing, and nothing that anybody says will logically or reasonably get through to you for you to process it and actually do something. So when you get in that state, everyone who's listening to this has been in that state. You ever get in an argument with somebody and then the argument just escalates and you just keep arguing, and then when the argument's over, you're like, man, I could have just stopped at this point 20 minutes ago, but you couldn't, because you get into that zone and you just stay there. I believe, again, I cannot read this man's mind, but I believe that's what happened with Officer Derek Chauvin, or former Officer Derek Chauvin. I believe he was such in a zone for whatever reason that he wasn't going to do what some mere civilians were telling him to do, because he's a cop. And police officers have what we know as situational power. Any of you who's ever dealt with a police officer comes up to you and they believe you're doing something wrong, or they got something to say to you, or they're telling you to do something. The police officer has power in that situation. We call it situational power, that the worst thing you can do is to try to debate or argue with the officer at that point, because they have the power of the situation. And the best case scenario is that they can make your day kind of unpleasant. They can delay you if they don't do anything else. Worst case, they could kill you like they did to George Floyd. And I'm explaining that to say this. Officer Chauvin, knowing that he has situational power, however long he's been a police officer, he knew he had power in that situation. They say he worked as a security guard when he was off duty. He was an off-duty security guard, like as a detail for bars and clubs when he wasn't working full-time as a cop. So he knows what it feels like to have that situational power. And I'm sure, again, I've never been a bouncer or a security guard or a cop, but I'm sure if you experience that for long enough, you can kind of start feeling yourself and kind of get drunk on that position and be like, yo, I got situational power, and knowing that you have it. So I believe he was in the zone where he was not going to do anything different no matter what anybody said at that point. And that's why he wouldn't get off of George Floyd's neck, even though it seemed like 4 cops, one guy who has his hands cuffed behind his back, they're going to win no matter what situation. They can stand him up and let him walk around free. What is he going to do to any of them? All right, and this is a conversation that you could take what I just said and put that back in 1992 when Rodney King got beat by the cops in Los Angeles. Different situation, at least Rodney King got to live through it. Now, even if, again, back to my point, even if you think the cops are within their job duty, using force because they needed to, because for whatever reason, however you see it, you believe George Floyd was resisting. Even if you believe that, you would still have to admit that the result was not the right result. All right, that guy should not have lost his life because he was not using any force that caused the cop to have to kill him. Maybe the cops could have punched him in his face, threw him on the ground, ganged up on him, whatever they needed to do, whatever they might have felt they needed to do. They didn't need to use deadly force. The knee on the back of the neck was deadly force, and it looks, because it's on video, it looks terrible. Everyone can agree to that. And that's not going to help any case for anyone who thinks the cops were in the right. So are we all still on the same page here? Anybody, have I lost anyone to this point? Good. Maybe you could argue that George Floyd resisted because the official police report says he was resisting in some ways. Again, some verbally, some he was resisting kind of by just not doing what the cops were telling him to do. It's not like he was fighting the cops or spitting on them or saying, fuck you, I'll kick your ass. He wasn't doing that. It wasn't an aggressive resistance. It was more like a passive resistance. Whatever he was saying, and again, they tried to pull him out the car and all right, walk over to the police car, but he wouldn't walk. So that is, technically that is resistance. So even if you think he was resisting and the cops had to restrain him, again, fine. But you don't kill the guy because again, he's not threatening you. And that's why they got fired immediately. That's why Officer Chauvin was charged. And a lot of people don't know this. Derek Chauvin's wife filed for divorce on Friday because I think she realizes, and her life is probably not in a good space right now, especially if and when her name gets out. It may already be out by this point. Now she got to live with that stain for the rest of her life, that she was married to a guy who would do this. And another thing that I've heard, actually I've seen, there was a picture going around online, still going around online, of Officer Chauvin. I guess when he was off work, he had on a red hat, same kind of hat Donald Trump wore during his campaigns. And the hat said, "Make whites great again." Not make America great again, make whites great again. They said he was wearing this hat. So people are taking this to say, well, this guy he was a blatant racist. I guess we can say he was a Trump supporter. He's wearing that hat. And people are saying he's a blatant racist. This is what I'm not going to do. I am not going to profess that I can read this man's mind. I'm not going to say that he is racist. We throw that term around a lot and call people racist if they do this, or you support this, or you don't do this, that means you're racist. We're not going to go that far and say that he's racist, because one thing that I say here, work on your game. In my books, on these shows, videos, whatever, is that in life, this is a results-based business. People are going to be judged based on the results they produce. We're not going to judge you on what we think you're thinking. We're not going to judge you on who you might agree with or disagree with, because everyone's free to have their own opinion. And even if you think Derek Chauvin is racist, I did a whole masterclass on this exact topic. Racism is not a crime. I'm not saying it is right. I'm not saying that I agree with it. But racism is not a crime. So if someone is racist, they're allowed to be racist. Just like you think someone's an asshole or someone thinks you're an asshole, you are allowed to be. All right, that is not a crime in itself. We are going off of results only, ladies and gentlemen. We are not judging intent. Judging intent is a slippery slope, because as soon as you start judging other people's intent, then you start making these jumps. You start making these jumps from, okay, this is what happened, so I think he meant to do this, which means he believes this, which means he believes this. And by that point, by the time you get to a conclusion, you have made so many assumptions that you've lost all the logical, reasonable people who are trying to follow what you were saying. So I want to make sure I'm not making too many assumptions here today. I'm trying to make none. I'm trying to go off complete what we know, the actual results of what happened in this situation. So whether this man is racist or not, I don't know, because I didn't hear him say it. Whether he hates black people or not, I don't know, because I didn't hear him say it. Whether or not you believe he's a bad person or just an idiot, or he shouldn't be a cop because he had on that red hat that said "Make whites great again," or because you believe he's a Trump supporter, or whatever you think Trump is about, we're not going to jump to any conclusions about what that means about any person's intent. I am not here to judge your intent, but I will judge the results of your actions. All that being said, let's move on to point number 4. As long as we all still on the same page. We still on the same page? Great. Point number 4. So here's a question that some people are asking. This is a question that, and not in so many words, but the question that Tommy Lauren, who is a conservative voice on social media or wherever it is she publishes her material, and Donald Trump, again, not in so many words, have voiced, which is, why are people rioting? Why would you riot? So you're a person of color. you're a black person, another black person, a fellow black person got killed by a white cop in your neighborhood, you're in fear, you're in terror, you're pissed off, you're angry, you're tired of this happening over and over again. So this is me right now. I'm speaking as the white person who was questioning what happened, the aftermath. You're wondering, white person, why would black people go and riot, destroy their own community, burn down buildings in the city that they live, loot the targets in their own neighborhoods and break windows and do all kinds of shit? Why would they do that to their own neighborhood as a response to a person getting killed by a cop? What exactly does that do? What is the point of that action? I'm going to help answer that question. And again, if I make too big of a jump here, because I've never rioted, I've never looted a store, I've never burned down a building or anything like that. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. But I'm going to try to draw some conclusions here as to why people are doing that, to help answer the question for people who are wondering. Yeah, I get that people are pissed about what happened with George Floyd, but why would they respond by rioting? Why would they respond by burning buildings now? Here's why. And this is something that requires a certain level of maturity for people to understand. Not everyone has the same tools that you have. We don't all have the same tools up in our heads. What I mean by that is this. There are some people in life who can experience the worst that life can bring. Anything under dying, they can experience the worst that life can bring. They can experience unfairness. They can experience things that are just straight up crimes against humanity. They can experience things that are just so wrong that you don't know how you will respond if that happened to you. But those people, even though they experience the worst that life can bring, they can still express love after it happens. Case in point, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela got jailed for 27 years just because of his beliefs, probably partly also because of his skin tone and whatever he supported, and that wasn't the position of power to be in at that time. Went to jail for 27 years, got out of jail. I mean, you ever seen Nelson Mandela say anything that sounded angry or attacking or accusatory? It was always love, even though he went to prison. Imagine somebody put you in prison right now and you didn't get out for 27 years just because of what you believed. He didn't even commit an actual crime, but he was still able to express love. I'm saying that to say this. He experienced that terrible injustice, came out, and wasn't even angry. Wasn't mad at anybody. Trayvon Martin's family. I don't have to explain to you who Trayvon Martin is. Google it if you don't know. His family expressed a certain level of calmness and composure after what happened to their son. And when his killer was subsequently exonerated for the charges against him, that had that been my son, had that been my cousin, my brother, had it been a teammate of mine from a basketball team, I don't know if I could have responded the way that they responded. And I'm telling you that, not to tell you that you need to be like that. I'm telling you that for you to understand that not everyone deals with things in the same way. I've had somebody say the wrong thing to me in an elevator, and I responded with way more anger or negative energy than Trayvon Martin or Nelson Mandela ever expressed. And all that person did was say something to me that I didn't like. And I'm sure many of you who's listening to me right now can understand the parallel between what I just explained. You have reacted way more to something that was way less than what some of these other people have dealt with. And I only gave you 2 examples, but there are plenty more out there. Everybody had different ways of dealing with things. All of that being said, this is what I'm explaining to you. I'm answering the question about why people would riot when they're upset about a person losing their lives at the hands of a cop. I mean, it's not like the building killed the cop, so why would you burn down the building? What's burn down the building going to do about the cop? I'm answering that question. When people feel that their voices and concerns are being ignored, and this includes you, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, here's what we all do. Let me repeat. Here's what we all do when we feel like our voices are not being heard, when our opinions are not being respected. We find other means of drawing attention to ourselves. Has any of you ever been in school with a kid who just seemed to always act out, always making noise, always causing some disturbance in the class. And you're like, why is this kid so bad? Why can't he just sit in the room and be quiet like all the other students? Why is this kid always causing the disturbance? You wonder why that is. You ever had a classmate like that? Maybe you've been that classmate, and why is that? Because some people, when they feel like they're not being heard, when they feel like their opinion doesn't matter, when they feel like their voice is falling on deaf ears everywhere they go, they will find, human beings, we are very resourceful creatures. When we are not being heard one way, we will try another way. We're not being heard that way, we will try another way. We're not being heard that way, we will try another way, and we will keep trying ways to be heard until we get your attention. If somebody really, really wants your attention and you are really trying to ignore them, depending on how badly they want your attention, they will do whatever they got to do to get you to pay attention. If their will is strong enough or their emotions are triggered enough, they will find a way to get your attention. People want to know, why would people listen to what Donald Trump said and his whole campaign speeches and all the things that he did? Why would people go and vote for him in 2016? I'll tell you why a good number of people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. I wasn't one of them, but I'll tell you why some of them did. Not all of them, but some of them. They felt like they were being ignored. They felt like they weren't being heard. They felt like they weren't being seen. They said, okay, y'all want to ignore us? Y'all don't want to see us? Y'all don't want to hear our voices? All right, watch what we do now. And they spoke at the voting booth. Some of you might be one of those people who's listening to me right now. Well, guess what? The black people who feel like their voices are not being heard when it comes to police brutality and people dying in the street, they feel like they're not being heard. Whether you agree with them or not does not matter. Remember the ground rules we established at the beginning of this episode. Shut the fuck up and listen. Whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter. And this is what I tell people of color the same thing. Whether you agree or not with people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and who are going to vote for him again in 2020, whether you agree or not does not matter. What you need to understand is why they would do something that you consider to be completely irrational, illogical, makes no sense, because some people, when they feel like they are not being heard, they will go to extremes to make sure you hear them. So there are people of color in Minnesota, Atlanta, LA, Philly, Virginia, wherever, who feel like when they saw what happened to George Floyd and they saw that it took the Minneapolis legal department, whatever it's called, it took them a little bit of time to kind of figure out, should we charge this guy or not? They didn't immediately do it. When it took them some time to get around to arresting this guy and charging him with a crime, there were some black people who said, all right, we're not being heard. Obviously, all right, they're taking their time on this. They're dragging their feet on this. Let me ask a side question right here. Let's switch the colors of the people in that George Floyd situation. Let's say that was a 46-year-old white man who might have been drunk, might have bought some cigarettes with a counterfeit bill, and might have not walked to the cop car when 4 black cops came to accost him. And then a black cop kneeled on his neck while a bunch of white people stood around filming it. The white guy laying on the ground with handcuffs on said, I can't breathe. And the black cop didn't take his knee off that man's neck until the white man died. How quickly would that black cop have been arrested? How much outrage would you, white person, have expressed over that? Actually, you know what? That's a trick question. That's not even a fair question, because you know what? White people, and I'm gonna go ahead and make this assumption right here. And any white person who's listening to me right now who thinks it's crazy that people are rioting, I want you to let me know if I'm wrong about this right here. If that had happened, if there had been 4 black cops and a white guy died while the police were trying to arrest him, you wouldn't have to express any outrage. You wouldn't have to riot. You wouldn't have to post a hashtag or post anything on Instagram. You know why? Because that black cop, all 4 of those black cops, would have been in jail so fast, they would have been arrested by the time the video went viral. Now, somebody tell me I'm wrong. Somebody tell me that wouldn't have happened. Of course it would have happened. Now, back to my point. That was just a side question. When people are being ignored, and this includes you, you ever had somebody just ignoring you for whatever reason? They're just not listening to you. They seem to not be hearing you when you're trying to make your point. What do? Do you just give up talking to them? But what if you really need to make a point? Maybe you do. What if you really need to make a point to somebody? What if you really need somebody's attention? What if you really need a certain person to notice what you're saying or what you're doing, or you really need them to tend to what is important to you? What would you do? How far would you go? You go as far as you need to until you get the attention that you need. Is this true or is this not true? Is there anyone listening to me right now who's never done this? Is anyone who's listening to me right now who has never done something completely irrational and illogical that you look back on now and say, damn, maybe I went a little bit too far with that, but I had to do what I had to do? Is there anybody listening to me who never has been through that situation? Anyone listening to me right now who's never said something crazy to somebody because you were just trying to get their attention, not because you really meant the crazy thing that you said, because you need to get that person's attention and wake them the hell up? Anybody who's never done that? Anybody who's never done something where you can look back and say, maybe I went a little bit too far with what I did there, but I had to get that attention. I had to get my words being heard. I had to get my opinion recognized. So I did what I had to do, even though I know I went too far. Anybody here who has never said that? Of course not. We are human and we all do this. We will all go too far, explode, say too much, overreact, do things that we later regret, do things that we may later apologize for. But we had to do what we had to do in the moment because we felt like we weren't being heard. So when you look on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever the hell, I don't advise you watching the news, as I talked about a couple weeks ago right here on this show. But if you are, and you see those people rioting, you're wondering what the hell is wrong with them. What you're seeing is what is this. You're seeing people expressing themselves in the only way that they feel like they're going to be paid attention to and they're going to be heard. And guess what? What did I tell you a few minutes ago? Life is a results-based business. What's the result of those riots? Well, there are several results, but I guarantee you what one of them is. You're paying attention, ain't you? You're listening now, aren't you? Every person in America knows what's going on right now. Everybody knows. All the white people know. All the black people know, and everybody who's a shade in between knows what's going on. So it worked. Black people felt like they weren't being heard. Another body in the street. It took the Minneapolis court system or whatever you call it. It took them a day or two to arrest this guy. They're like, all right, now had a black dude killed a white guy, would they have taken it? Would they have had to think about it? Or they have had to get the police report? Would there be an army of people surrounding the black officer's house, protecting him and his house and his family if he had killed a white cop? Would that even have happened? Would the president, Donald Trump, be saying, we're going to send officers and the National Guard to that city to make sure that city doesn't get torn down by a whole bunch of angry white people if a black cop had killed a white guy? Would any of that be happening right now? You know and I know, ain't no way in hell that would be happening. So what you're seeing right now are black people getting the attention that they need, and maybe I'm not professing to read people's minds, because again, I'm not out there on the front lines rioting. I'm seeing people maybe expressing themselves in the only way that they know how. This is the way that they know to get attention, and guess what? Damn it, it's working. Now, if nobody was paying attention to the riots, if nobody cared, then they would try something else. They would do it a different way. They would try a different approach. But it's working. And sometimes in life, as you have already admitted, you have done some irrational things, some illogical things, and said some stuff that you didn't really need to say because you felt like you weren't being heard. Now, all that being said, I am not condoning the rioting. I'm not condoning burning down the neighborhood. If I knew someone who was out there and they called me and said, Dre, I'm out here rioting and throwing rocks at the cops and burning down convenience stores, I would tell them, take your ass home. Go home. Don't do that. That's what I would tell them. I wouldn't tell them to do it. But I also understand that there are some people who are in a space right now mentally, emotionally, maybe even physically, where they do not feel like they're being heard. And they know they got to make noise, and this is the way they know to make noise. And damn it, it's working. So you can't say that they're wrong, because they're trying to get attention. They're trying to get you to notice what's going on, and you're noticing. You're talking about it. You've been listening to me for a damn hour because you know this is going on. Now, if I was talking about something that you didn't know was happening, you might have turned it off already. You're like, all right, this doesn't concern me. I don't know nothing about what this dude's talking about. Let me go listen to something else. But you're listening because you know what's happening. How do you know what's happening? Because you ain't got no choice but to pay attention. So obviously the shit worked. Sometimes in life, I've said this many times on this show, and I will say it many times again. Sometimes in life, you got to make noise to be heard. And if you're not willing to make noise, you will be ignored. Right now, when George Floyd died, some black people decided they was going to make some noise. And you're listening. Now again, let me reestablish the ground rule for those of you who may be formulating an argument in your mind right now against what you just heard. If you do not come from circumstances where you feel like your voice is consistently being ignored, if you do not come from circumstances where you feel people who look like you could be murdered by a police officer and nobody's going to give a fuck, nothing's going to happen, where the officers might not even get charged, or they may get charged and beat the charge, a la the Trayvon Martin situation. If you do not come from that circumstance, if you look in the mirror and realize that you are lucky enough to be born white in a country that was and is made for and run by white people, in other words, if you're the type of person who has been playing your whole life a home game, shut the fuck up and listen. Let me double back to what I just said there, because I want to make sure I'm being clear. The United States of America was established by and for white people. Anyone have an argument with that? Does anyone disagree? Anyone tell me I'm wrong? Now, this is not a condemnation of white people. If you're white, I'm not saying you're wrong for being white. You didn't choose to be white. It's just the world you were born into. You were born into the family you were born into. You happen to be born on third base. It's not your fault you were on third base and somebody else is born in the parking lot. It ain't your fault. I'm not attacking you. I'm not against you for that. But if you were lucky enough to be born in a country that was made for and by people who look like you, right, then you have no idea what it feels like to be one of those people who's out there rioting. You have no idea. And guess what? Unless you move to another country where the people don't look like you and is not buying for people who look like you, you never will know what it's like. Therefore, and I'm not telling you to leave the country. I'm not telling you that you need to try to feel what they feel, because it's impossible for you to feel what they feel. Your job is to shut the fuck up and listen. You are playing a home game. You know what a home game is? This is just a metaphor that I used there a moment ago. Let me explain it. A home game in life is a situation where everything is set up. Circumstances are set up for you to be successful. That is a home game. If you play on a sports team as a kid and your dad is the coach, so you're always starting and you get the most minutes, that's a home game. The situation's set up for you to win. Or your dad's not going to keep you on the bench most of the time. Maybe some dads will. But you get what I'm saying. A road game, by contrast, is a situation that's not set up for you to win. Nobody's cheering for you to succeed. People may even set up barriers and roadblocks in your way just to make it even harder on you, on top of the fact that the circumstance already wasn't in your favor and you got to win against that. That's a road game. Let me explain something to the non-people of color who are listening to this right now. Black people in the United States are playing a road game from the day they're born. This is a road game. Your whole life is a road game. Now, that doesn't mean, just because you're on a road game, doesn't mean you can't be cool with some of the people who are playing the home game. You can be cool with some of the people who it's set up for them to win. You can get some benefits from your relationships with those people. You can meet some of those people. You can be cool with some of those people. You can have some of those people as your audience, as your fans, as your friends, and you can be in a relationship with some of those people. But I want everyone to understand, if you're a white person living in America, you're playing a home game. You ain't played a road game yet, unless you lived in another country where, again, you can't even pass for one of the locals. Unless you've been in that situation, you've been playing a home game your whole damn life. You have no idea what it feels like to be on the road. Tommy Lauren, you don't know what it feels like to be on the road. Donald Trump doesn't know what it feels like to be on the road. At least in this case, when we're talking about race. Black people been on the road. And sometimes when you're on the road, you got to band together with the people you came with, because that's the only way you're going to get out of there. It's the only way you leave it. And listen, as I said, I don't hate white people. There are white people who I call friends, clients, business partners, associates, partners, shake hands with when I see them, cool with right now. People rioting, who are rioting, they see this as a road game that they can't win. They see a black person killed by a police officer and nobody stopped it. None of the cops said, yo, get the hell off of his neck. What the hell are you doing? They see the president of the United States saying, he starts talking about the riots instead of talking about the guy getting killed. That's what they see. They see a police officer with his foot on the guy's neck who dies on the spot, and he gets to stay in his house normally for another 24 to 48 hours after the video goes viral. And he doesn't even get arrested until, what, Friday? Killed the guy on Monday. He didn't get arrested until Friday. Again, if a black cop killed a white guy, well, he got arrested on Friday? It looks like a road game that they can't win. What does an animal do when it's backed into a corner, ladies and gentlemen? Any animal, you back it into a corner. It could be the weakest, most bitch-ass, softest, smallest animal in the world. You back it into a corner, it will fight. Doesn't mean it's gonna win, but it will fight. And guess what? Human beings are animals. You would fight too. But if you've never been backed into a corner, you never felt like your life was backed into a corner, you never felt like you were playing a road game that you couldn't possibly win because there are so many circumstances set up against you, you ain't never been in that situation. So who are you to judge it? That's the question that I'm asking you. Who are you to judge what someone did in a circumstance that you have never been in? You never walked in those shoes. Who are you to judge what somebody should do walking in those shoes? You know, it's funny, sometimes people see another person doing something or saying something, they say, I would never do that. I would never say that. I would never react like that. And you know what? You're right. You would never react like that because you are not that person. But guess what? Had you been born where they were born, if you looked how they looked, you were raised the way they were raised and lived through the circumstances and situations that they lived through, you would do exactly what they did because you wouldn't have any other option. You wouldn't know any other way of doing things. You say you wouldn't do what they do because you have a completely different experience. But what if their experience was the exact experience you had in your life? What else would you do? You ain't got no other choices. You don't know anything else. You don't have any other tools. You don't have any other tools. The people you see doing things that you consider to be dumb and unreasonable and making no sense, to them, it's completely smart, it's completely reasonable, and it makes perfect sense because they don't know anything else. They are responding the only way that they know how, and every human being is unique. Do not be so naive or so self-centered as to think that your way of responding to things is the only way to respond to things, or that your way is the best way of responding to things. Because other people don't even know about your way. They're not aware of your way. And you couldn't beat it into them even if you wanted to. Point number 5. Let's talk about President Donald Trump and others who have gone out of their way to mention the thugs and the riots and the people looting and destroying property, etc., etc. They have glossed over the fact that a black man lost his life at the hands of a police officer. Well, at least what it looks like on camera. The autopsy said different, but what it looks like on camera, a black man lost life at the hands of a police officer, or the knee of a police officer if we want to be graphic. And they're just talking about the riots and the thugs and the people burning down buildings, et cetera, and protecting the city with the National Guard, et cetera, et cetera. All right, here's my response to that. I don't get worked up over words. I don't get worked up over tweets. I don't get worked up over Instagram captions or emails or DMs or any of that shit. Donald Trump, I've said this many times, okay, I'm gonna say it again, and this is for the people of color. All right, this is for the black people who are like, all right, what about Donald Trump? He's an asshole, he's saying this and that, he's racist, he's doing this. All right, here's the thing about Donald Trump. All right, I gotta say this again, I'm sure I'm gonna have to say it again, and if things continue the way they look right now, he's probably gonna win the election in 2020. Joe Biden's not beating him, so hopefully somebody else comes around. But anyway, if it goes the way it's looking right now, he's gonna win again. So people are gonna have more to say. Let me tell y'all something about Donald Trump. Please write this down so I don't have to keep saying it. Donald Trump is a salesperson, ladies and gentlemen. He's a salesperson. This is what he does. He knows who his base is, i.e. his customer. Donald Trump knows who his customer is. Any of you as an entrepreneur, you could call what Donald Trump does, he knows his avatar. All right, he has mastered his avatar. He knows who they are. He knows that when he speaks, all he has to do to speak to what they're thinking. He speaks to their mentality. That's all he's doing. Notice that most of the things that Donald Trump even mentions in his tweets, I don't follow him on Twitter, but I see some of the things that he says because his things that he say gets around. Most of the things that he talks about and threatens and this and that, a lot of them don't even happen. The whole point of him saying what he says on Twitter is to shift your attention from one thing to another thing. That's all he's doing. The reason why he mentioned the riots and the thugs and the this and that in that tweet was to take everyone's attention off of what? The killing of George Floyd and put it on, oh, these people are burning down buildings. We need to defend our city and defend our country. We're not going to allow these things to happen. And then this is what happened. Some of you who is not intelligent enough to understand what's going on, you're not intelligent to understand to the game that's being played, he played you because you started responding to Donald Trump. You started reacting to Donald Trump rather than keeping the focus where it needs to be. He played you. He sold you on reacting to him rather than doing what you should have did, which was ignore him and keep your focus on the main issue at hand. So any of you who's found yourself reacting to Donald Trump or any other super conservative, far-right individual who for whatever reason has chosen to focus on the riots and the violence and things, instead of keeping your focus on George Floyd dying at the hands of a cop, any of you who found yourself responding to that, you are the fool who got played. He took you out of your game. He's like the trash talker in basketball who gets you so focused on talking back to the trash talker that you don't run the plays properly and you end up messing up and costing your team the game. He played you. He's not the fool, you're the fool. This is his game. In case y'all didn't know, he's been playing the same game it's been damn near 4 years now. Y'all ain't caught on yet? Do not get distracted by what anyone else says or by reacting to other people. That's the entire point, is to shift your attention. This is what he does. If something happens to or for Trump that would make him look bad, all he does is say something to shift your attention off the thing that would make him look bad or the thing that he may not have anything to say to. He'll shift it to something that he can talk about, something that will put him back in a position of power and a position of drawing all the attention. That's all he's doing. How are y'all still missing it? He started his campaign in 2015. It's 2020. It's been 5 years. Y'all ain't learned yet? Y'all slow learners? You know what happens to slow learners in life, right? They get left behind. They get left for dead. Y'all watch Animal Planet, right? You know what happens to the wildebeest and the gazelles who run slow? When the lions start coming, what happens to them? You know what happens. They become dinner. All right, some of y'all are the broken down wildebeest or the slow gazelle. Y'all getting eaten up by the lions. Don't even know this is happening. Point number 6. Please don't make me have to bring up that point ever again. Point number 6. I'm sure I will, though. Point number 6. Now let's talk about solutions. I said this on my Instagram story on Saturday that I wasn't even going to speak on this whole situation till I had something to offer as an actual solution. I don't want to be a person pissing in the wind, just talking shit. Everybody's talking shit. Everybody's posting something on Instagram. Everybody's saying, man, we need to have compassion. We need to learn. We need to do better. This is not right. And no, I didn't need to be another person adding to that. I don't disagree with any of those things, but I don't need to be another person adding to the noise that is already happening. Again, as I said, I wasn't going to speak unless I could improve on the silence or improve on the conversation that's already happening. And what I don't see anybody talking about are solutions. So I want to talk about some solutions. I got 2 of them. These are points 6 and 7. Solution number 1 is we're going to, first of all, on the practical level. These police officers, specifically, Derek Chauvin, did something that they shouldn't have did. Everyone agree with that, right? And in America, the system says they must face justice. That's where we are right now. They got to face justice for what happened. I said that on Wednesday on my Instagram Live. On Friday, the guy got arrested. He's been charged. He has to be not just charged. When he goes to court, he gets to have his lawyer. He gets to say his piece. He gets to defend himself however he wishes to. Who knows how that's going to go? I'm sure we'll all be paying attention. He must be convicted and must be given serious prison time for what happened. That's solution number 1. He needs to, first of all, he needed to be arrested. He's been arrested. Check, that's done. He needs to be charged. He's been charged. Check, that's done. Now he needs to stand trial. Who knows how long that's going to take? These trials could take forever to actually happen. He needs to stand trial. On that trial, he must be convicted by the jury of his peers. He must be convicted and he must get serious prison time for what happened. Now, here's the thing. If for whatever reason the charges get dropped or he doesn't get convicted, or he doesn't get serious prison time, if any of those three things, if he does not get serious prison time, I'm talking, how many years we talking here? I would say with the charge that he got, at least 15 years, at least. If he got life, nobody would be mad at it. At least 15 years of prison. If he doesn't get that, if he gets anything less than that, that's gonna be a problem. If people think there were riots now, there'll be riots now. That's gonna be a problem if he doesn't at least get serious time for that. Even if he does get, even if he got life, even if he got the electric chair, that doesn't bring back the life of George Floyd. And it doesn't make it okay what happened to George Floyd. But at least if he gets serious time, we can all say, all of us, we can say the system seems to be working for everyone, at least for once, at least in this case. At least in one situation, a person of color was wrongfully killed by a person who's supposed to be protecting and serving. Isn't that the job of the cops? To protect and serve? At least once we can say, this cop did the wrong thing to a black person, and that black life lost was valued enough that this person received the type of punishment that they should get. Derek Chauvin needs to get the type of punishment that a black cop would get for killing a white person. Whatever you think that would be, that's what he needs to get. That's justice. Now, I want to make sure I'm also putting this in there when it comes to the police, period. Just the police in general. All right, do not be mad. Anyone who feels like what happened with George Floyd is wrong. Black, white, whatever. Don't be mad at police. All right? We don't hate the cops in general. All right? We are not against the police. I met a lot of police. I know some police. I've been in situations with police where they actually diffused a situation and calmed situations down and were very nice guys and women. All right, there are plenty of those out there. I would think more cops, there are more good cops than bad cops. There are more cops who are actually trying to protect and serve and actually help the public than be assholes or whatever words you want to use to describe Derek Chauvin and those other three officers. There are plenty of great cops out there. So we are not mad at cops. We are not against cops. We are not against white people. We are not against anybody who has not quote unquote, spoken out on this situation. We're going to get to that in a moment. We're not mad at any of those. I want to make sure I'm being very clear on this point right here. And it's going to lead into point number 7. It is not other people's jobs to fight your battles. I'm talking to everybody. Any of you here who ever faces a situation in life where things are unjust, things are not working in your favor, you don't like how something is going, things are unfair, somebody's doing you wrong, it is not anyone else's job to fight your battles. It's your battle, it's your job to fight it. So those of you black folks who are upset about what happened with George Floyd and this police officer, don't be mad at all cops. There are cops out there who feel just as strongly as you do. They may not, based on their role and where they are or who they are, they may not be able to say it, or maybe they haven't, maybe they have, but don't be mad at all cops. All the cops didn't kill George Floyd. It was one cop. It was one person. So if you're going to be mad at the one person who did the wrong thing, or you could say the 4 people who did the wrong thing. If you don't be mad at white people, be mad at the white cop who did the wrong things. Not all white people did not kill George Floyd. All white people in America don't go outside and hunt black people every single day. All cops do not go outside and hunt down black people every single day. So we got to be careful with the hyperbole. And this is something that really annoys the shit out of me when I'm on social media and I see people, especially prominent black people who have a lot of followers, with all this hyperbole. And the reason is this. There's somebody like, I'm not even going to say no names. I'm not going to attack anybody when they're not here to defend themselves. But those of you who follow anyone prominent and black on social media, you know who I'm talking about when I say this. Things happen and they come out and they say shit like, oh man, they're hunting us every day. All they're doing is killing us. Every time we go outside, we're being targeted. We're being hunted. We're being attacked. The police are doing this to black people. Well, listen, no, that's not what's happening. There are some bad cops out there who do the wrong thing and things happen to certain people in certain situations. We're not going to say the cops are attacking black people. That's not true. We're not going to say white people are racist and they want to get rid of black people. That is not true. We have to identify. We have to be specific. I heard Lil Wayne, actually, of all people, say this. He said, we got to be specific. You can't say the cops. You can't say white people. No, it was one cop, one white person who did the wrong thing in this situation. In any other situation, we got to identify the person or people who did the wrong thing. We're not going to group everybody together. I mean, think about you. you were outside and somebody in a hoodie walked by you and pushed you and stole your phone and ran away, are you going to just shoot the next person you see with a hoodie on because they got a hoodie like the person who did something wrong to you? No. If a white person does something wrong to you, they steal some money from you, are you going to beat up the next white person you see to make up for the white person who stole money from you? No, you're going to find the individual who did it and you're going to do something to them. So we got to make sure that we're not extrapolating one person did the wrong thing. So now we're going to say anybody who does what you do for a living, or anyone who looks like you, or anyone who agrees with something that you agree with, we're just going to attack all of them together. No, that is not true. All right, this guy, let's say he was a supporter of Trump. So we're not going to say every supporter of Trump wants to kill all black people, because I don't think that's true. We're not going to say every cop is against black people. I don't believe that to be true. And we're not going to say every white person from some white suburb or whatever way you want to describe Derek Chauvin, whatever attributes you want to attach to him, whether they're true or you're assuming them, we are not going to say anyone else who shares that attribute is also whatever you think about Derek Chauvin, because every human being is unique. Any of you right now, do you like being grouped together with other people who are like you? If you're a model, do you want people to say, oh yeah, I know models, they're all dumb, because I met one dumb model once, so you're a model, so you must be dumb. How do you feel when somebody says that about you? If you're black and people say, oh, you're black, so that must mean you're a rapper or a basketball player, and you're not, how do you feel when somebody says that to you? If you're a fill in the blank and you're like, and somebody comes to you and says, oh, I knew somebody who was a fill in the blank, that means they're this, this, and this, and you're like, yo, I'm an individual person, don't group me with somebody that you knew. How would you feel when somebody said that about you? So we're not going to do that. That's another thing that we ain't going to do here. We are not going to generalize anyone who shares characteristics with the one guy who did something wrong and then put that on everybody else. We're not doing that. That's ignorance. Ignorance goes both ways. And the reason why I brought up the prominent black people who go into this hyperbole and say things like, we're being targeted every day, every time we go outside, the cops are killing us, we can't do anything, we can't go anywhere. Well, first of all, we know that that's not true, because you, prominent black person, you're alive. All right, the cops were targeting you, you'd be dead already. All right, somebody got a good shot. If they were really targeting you every time you went outside, how'd you make it to 40 years old? You ain't being targeted every time. And the reason why I'm even saying that, I know that's kind of meta, but the reason that I'm saying that is because the people who are prominent, who are well known, you got millions of followers on social media, and you come out and say these things, here's what you need to understand. This is something that I said years ago on this very show. 3 things you need to understand about human beings in general. People are lazy, people do not think, and people do not read. They wait for someone who they know, like, and trust to tell them what their opinion should be, and then they just accept that opinion without thinking about it. Therefore, you famous black guy, famous singer, famous rapper, famous model, famous IG personality, when you come out and use hyperbole and say something that is logically incorrect, that doesn't make sense but is emotionally charged, there are a whole bunch of people, a large percentage of your followers, who do not think and do not read, and they get their opinions from you. Whatever you say, they believe, and then they go spread it. And there are, unfortunately, a whole lot more stupid people on this planet than there are smart people. And then this bad idea, this bad information starts spreading before any logical information gets out. And this is part of what is pulling us as a people down, when people who don't think go out and say something, but because they're popular, their non-thinking opinion or their non-thinking belief gets spread and accepted by a whole bunch of other people who don't even know where they got it from, but they accept it, they believe it, and they'll even defend it. Oh, because such and such said it. Oh, because this NBA player said it. No, this rapper said it. This actor said it. This person with 2 million followers said it, so it must be true. And you can't change their mind because they believe it because you said it. So that's why when people become prominent and you have an audience, that's why you have a responsibility, because there are people who are looking to you for their ideas, for their concepts, for their thoughts. And if you are not smart enough to understand and accept that and give people the right information, or to give them nothing if you have nothing useful to say, then you are doing your own people a disservice. And the disappointing thing about what I'm saying now, an hour and 20 minutes into what I'm talking about here, is the people who actually need to hear that are probably not even listening to me anymore. But y'all can let them know that I said this. And anyway, the bottom line point here, point number 6, it is not other people's job to fight your battles. What I mean by that is, black folks, if we feel white people or cops or the government or whoever you want to generalize is doing something negative towards or onto you, it's not your job, it's not their job other white people or other government people or other whoever to fight your battles. Telling them that this is what's happening that is wrong and being mad about it and upset and letting everybody know via your Instagram, we're going to get into that in a minute. Point number 7. This is the last point today. This is solution number 2. I gave you solution number 1 is that practically we need justice to be served. We are so far on the right track. Now we got to see what happens in court with this guy. Everybody gets their day in court in America, even if you think they should be buried under the jail. Everybody gets their chance to speak their piece. Point number 7. Here's solution number 2. And I want to preface this by saying this is not a new thing coming from me. This is not a new concept. Those of you who have never heard of me before, you're listening to me for the first time ever in your life, this is not new what I'm about to say. Those of you who heard me before, hopefully you heard this when I said it before. If you didn't, you're hearing it now. The way to get other people, whoever the other is, okay, whoever that is, if you want other people to give a damn about your situation, your cause, and your problem, the way to do that, let me tell you what is not the way to do it, is to beg or plead or browbeat them about how they're wrong or how they need to listen or how they need to pay attention. In this sense, I do not agree with people protesting and rioting and burning things down. In this sense, I don't agree. I understand why, because as I explained earlier, everybody doesn't have the same tools, but in this sense, I do not agree. If you have a problem, anyone listening to it, you have a problem in your specific myopic world, and you feel other people need to know about that problem, but it's not their issue, all right, letting them know about your problem, telling them that they need to help, asking them if they will pay attention, or telling them that they're wrong because they're not paying attention or they're not doing something about it or they're not making as much noise as you're making, that is not the way to get other people to give a fuck about your problem. So let me fill in the gaps there and say it in a more direct way. Black people, if you feel that certain white people or certain cops or certain racists are against black people and they're trying to exterminate black people and they're targeting them and hunting them and killing them every single day, let me tell you what you should not do. Don't go to white people and say, hey, you need to notice this, you should pay attention to this, you need to speak out on this, you need to say something about this. Anybody who's not saying something is wrong. Look at all the people who are not saying anything. You know they're the people who want us to be dead and want us killed and want us targeted. No, that is bullshit. First of all, it doesn't work. Second of all, it sounds good and it feels good, but it does not produce an outcome. And third of all, it's incorrect. That is not the way to get a result. I want to remind you all one more time. What we talk about here at Work on Your Game is producing results. It is not about doing things that feel good and look good and play well on an echo chamber like social media. It's about getting an actual, tangible result that you can show to somebody. This is what I did. This is the outcome that I produced. Telling other people that they need to give a damn about your problem does not produce an outcome. It doesn't work. It feels good, it looks good, and you get a whole lot of energy from it when you're in the midst of it, especially if you're getting a lot of response from other people. But all it does in the long run is make you tired and it produces no outcome. I made it very clear. When Colin Kaepernick made his kneeling protest, and a lot of people there's been a meme going around of Colin Kaepernick taking a knee on the sideline during a football game, and then next to that is a picture of this officer, Derek Chauvin, taking a knee on the neck of George Floyd, and people are saying, oh, now you understand why Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, because look, this guy's taking a knee, and when Cap took a knee, people went crazy, but this guy's taking a knee, and he's killing people, and people are drawing this parallel, saying whatever they're saying. I was always very clear from the moment Cap came out with his kneeling, peaceful, silent protest, that his protest was not well thought out. Now, while yes, it did draw attention, mostly to Colin Kaepernick, not actually to the cause that he claimed to be kneeling about. Most of the conversation about Colin Kaepernick's kneeling was about Colin Kaepernick. It wasn't about police brutality. It wasn't about bodies in the streets. It was about people dying. It was about Colin Kaepernick, rather, not about people dying. It drew attention. People talked about him, but guess what? When was that? 2016? Well, here's another body in the street 4 years later, ladies and gentlemen. Did it work? Did Colin Kaepernick's protest produce a result? Did it stop bodies in the street? Did it stop the oppression, quote, oppression of black people, close quote? Did it do that? Now, even if you may support Cap, even if you're a fan of Cap, even if you got the black Cap jersey and you posted the I Stand With Cap hashtag and all of that, You tell me if his protest produced a result. If I'm wrong, I want you to let me know, and let me know why. Did his protest produce a result? I would say no, it absolutely did not. And the reason why I didn't produce a result, the main reason why I didn't produce a result is because he didn't know what the result was he was after when he started. Which is why, when's the last time we heard from him? You tell me. Protests, ladies and gentlemen. A silent protest, a loud protest, a peaceful protest, a violent protest. Protesting is not the answer to a problem. Again, it feels good, it looks good. Because we have social media, it will get amplified and shared, and everybody will talk about it, and you could even experience a small or even a large amount of fame from a protest. We've seen many examples of this. I just mentioned one. Protest is not going to produce a result. If you're after results, protesting is not the way to get it. You do not make other people change by telling them how wrong they are. That's what a protest is. A protest is letting people know that they're wrong. Remember when Donald Trump won the presidency, people were protesting. Not my president. They were protesting in the streets. There were demonstrations when he won. Did that produce a result? I mean, what was the outcome those people were after? They just wanted to make noise. They just wanted to feel good. We want to show solidarity. We're going to resist. He's not the president. Well, that was 4 years ago. How'd that work? Did it produce a result? Life, ladies and gentlemen, is a results-based business. Not a hashtag-based business. Not a make noise-based business. Not a get people talking about you based business. It's based on producing a result. If your efforts did not produce a result, you failed. That's the bottom line. Now, whether you want to hear that or not, whether you agree with it only up to the point that I mentioned somebody that you're a fan of, well, that's a personal issue that you need to deal with yourself. But if I'm wrong about anything I've said, you check me on it and tell me why. And if you quote me, make sure you quote me correctly. And make sure you include the context. We're an hour and a half into this. Don't take something I said out of context and try to get some burn on Instagram. I know how you motherfuckers do. You don't make people change by telling them how wrong they are. Let me tell you how you make people change. If you want someone else to do something different based on your problem, here's what you got to do. You got to make your problem their problem. Let me repeat that, and then I'll explain it. If you want to make other people change based on your problem, telling them about your problem and protesting about your problem and hashtagging and tweeting and Instagramming about your problem is not going to make people who are not affected by that problem give a fuck. They don't care. Why? Because you wouldn't care if they had a problem. If it's not your problem, why would you care? All right, you got to focus on you, right? You got to be selfish to be successful. All right, everyone in here everyone listening to me right now is narcissistic on some level that we are focused on ourselves. If it's not our problem, we don't really give a damn. The only time you get another person to really care about your problems is when they share the problem. Something about that problem got to be affecting them. That's the only way to guarantee somebody else is going to give a damn. People who play ball, you know who they respect? Other people who play ball. A man with a gun, who does he respect? Another man who got a gun. People in power, what do they respect? Other people who have power. Give you an example. Rosa Parks sat at the front of the bus. They told her she couldn't sit at the front of the bus because she was a person of color. She refused to move to the back of the bus. She got kicked off the bus, arrested. Civil rights movement started on the heels of that. When the civil rights movement happened, first of all, before the civil rights movement, I guess we could say the Montgomery bus boycott, Montgomery, Alabama, people of color stopped riding the bus. They walked, they carpooled, they rode a bike, they just didn't take the bus. Eventually, Montgomery caved to the pressure of the Montgomery bus boycott. Why? Why did the Montgomery government or transportation authority or whomever, why did they cave when the Montgomery bus boycott happened? Is it because a bunch of white people finally found the compassion in their heart to care about black people? No. Is it because black people were protesting and saying, y'all need to listen to us and listen to our problems? Is that why it happened? No. You know why the Montgomery bus boycott forced the Montgomery transportation authorities to change their process and do things differently? You know why that actually happened? It's because they were losing money. black people riding those buses was making them a lot of money. And when black people stopped taking those buses, their pockets start hurting. They said, damn it, we ain't making no money off these black people who ride our buses every day. All right, what the hell do they want? All right, they want to sit in the front of the bus. All right, we got to change the policy because we ain't making no money without them. That's why things change. You can look it up and see for yourself. If I'm wrong, let me know I'm wrong. Martin Luther King, there's a photo. I don't remember the gentleman's name who was in the photo, but you can look this up also. I didn't bother looking his name up. There was a photo of a young black male. He looked like he was a teenager. And there was a police officer standing not too far away from him. He had a dog, a canine on a chain. And the dog is like viciously biting at the young man. He's like inches away from the young man's shirt, biting at the young man. The young man is calmly just looking down at the dog and looking at the cop while the dog is biting at him. That image, I saw this in a documentary. I don't remember which one it was. Martin Luther King saw that image. He said, we must get that image and we got to spread it to the whole country so everybody can see how this racism from white people is attacking black people who aren't even doing anything wrong. And just the image, the imagery of that photo led to a lot of changes. Why? Because there were even white people who saw that and said, all right, now it's one thing if a cop and a dog are attacking a black guy who's doing the wrong thing, but this kid looks very innocent, very calm. He's not attacking, he's not yelling, he's not screaming, he's not hysterical. But look at this cop, this big cop with this big vicious dog biting at this kid who's not even doing anything. All right, this ain't right. That's when things started to change. It made even white people say this is a little bit too much. So what do we need to do right now? The last thing we need to do is be Instagramming and hashtagging and tweeting. What we need to do is empower ourselves. First of all, stop watching the news because it's not actual news. Second of all, stop reacting to everything Trump tweets. Stop amplifying everything he puts out on your Instagram pages. Every time you react to him on social media, all you're doing is amplifying his message and giving it to more people. All that does is serve to draw attention to whatever he's saying. And being that he's a great salesperson, probably a better salesperson than you, he knows how to get attention where he wants it and take it off where he doesn't want it. The lines have already been drawn. When it comes to Donald Trump, here's the thing. Almost everybody I ever have a conversation with about Donald Trump has decided how they feel about him. Is there anybody listening to this right now who's undecided about Donald Trump? Who's undecided? Who's looking at him like, you know what, let me see if I can figure this guy out. I'm not sure how I feel about him yet. The lines have already been drawn. People who love him, people who hate him, hate him. Everybody's already decided how they feel about Donald Trump. So if he says something and then you are amplifying it and giving your opinion, all right, who are you talking to? Who are you influencing with that opinion? What are you actually affecting? What results are you producing? The lines have already been drawn with the guy. Everybody who feels how they feel ain't changing. So here's what we need to do as I continue. You need to educate yourself. Get your life and your business in its proper order. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King didn't agree on everything, but 60 years ago, they had at least one common idea. People of color need to empower themselves so that when something isn't right in our communities, we can approach the powers that be. If we approach them, we can approach the powers that be with what? Not with protests, not with riots, not with complaints, not with bitching, not with hashtags. We can approach the powers that be with the one thing that powers that be respect. What do powers that be respect, ladies and gentlemen? Class, let's all say it together. They respect power. Power respects power. A person with a gun respects another person with a gun. A person who can fight respects somebody else who can fight. The powers that be respect power. Martin Luther King, before he was killed, one of the areas that he was going into after he got through the I have a dream and people being looked at by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, the next step in his process, and anybody who knows this, and you can look it up and read it yourself, the next step in the process after the civil rights movement was, all right, now black people, we need to get our money together. We need to get our money right so that we are financially empowered to do what we need to do for ourselves so we can stop looking to the government and looking to this person and that person for assistance when we don't have what we need. That was his next step before he got murdered. And many historians would argue that that's the reason he actually got murdered. They didn't care about the integrating blacks and whites. That wasn't that bad. Maybe it was uncomfortable for some, but that wasn't that bad. It was when he started talking about black people getting their money together so where they had the resources to do for self and not need to depend on the government or the police or whoever, that's when he got murdered. Some people believe that's the actual reason he got killed. It wasn't an accumulation of all the stuff. It was just when he got on that note, they're like, all right, now this is the part that we can't let them do that. Again, that's an argument that some make. You can read up about it and draw your own conclusions. Malcolm X was always on this. Malcolm X was all about separation. He said the black man, we need to leave America and get out of here, or we need to create our own separate state away from whatever the white man is doing. But they both had the same principle, which is we couldn't do what Malcolm X said if we didn't have our own stuff in power. We didn't have our own power. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have our own education. And a lot of us these days are being educated by Instagram. We're being educated by social media. We're being educated by people who are not qualified to give education. And we follow them because they're famous, because they're known, because they're funny, because they look good, whatever reason. But those people, not all of them, some of them are unqualified to be sharing what they're sharing. Unfortunately, stupid people don't know that they're stupid. If they were smart enough to know they were stupid, they wouldn't be stupid. People of color need to empower themselves because the powers that be respect power. People in power do not respect pleas for help. They do not respect emotional outbursts from people who have no power. They do not respect things that cost more than they gain. Like, we're doing things that cost us more than we gain. Rioting and demonstrating, again, it feels good, it looks good, it'll gain you some prominence if you're one of the leaders of it. But what does it actually get for you? What does it cost you and what does it get for you? I mean, if you're running a business and your costs exceed your profits or your costs exceed your revenues, all right, you're in trouble. That business ain't gonna last too long. And in our lives, I tell people, I say this all the time, life is a business, right? Costs you money to be born, costs money to die, costs money in between. So if we're doing things that cost us more in time, energy, effort, attention, and money than what we're actually getting in exchange, how are we running a business? How is that business ever going to be profitable if we're putting more energy out than what the resources we are getting back? Somebody tell me, because I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think it's possible. If there's a way that's mathematically possible, someone explain that math to me. How we do this, and this is the part that a lot of people are not going to want to hear. Maybe I should have said this at the beginning. But I'm saying it for the people who are disciplined enough to want to hear it. That's going to require every one of us individually, black people I'm talking to right now, and people who are not black, you can listen to this so you know that I'm on the record saying this. That'll require each one of us taking on personal responsibility and or having a leader who has the same idea, who then can influence the people who are highly susceptible to influence to doing it. Because there are a lot of people these days, as I said, being raised and educated by YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and that ain't going away, at least for the short term. So I'm not railing against it like it's a terrible thing. I use all of those platforms. But I also know how to separate the bullshit from the meat, from the whole foods, if you understand what I'm saying. A lot of people don't understand how to do so. They accept anything that they hear. Because what do they have to compare it against? Nothing. So if we can get a leader who is prominent enough, who can influence others to take on personal responsibility of getting their own shit together, to get everyone to take on that responsibility of getting their own shit together, that's the way we enact the kind of change that we want and get the kind of results that we want. A good example of this is a man by the name of Damon Dash. I did a whole Virtual Mentors episode on him, Virtual Mentors number 4. He's been talking about this stuff for a long time. He talks about it on his platforms. He talks about it when he gets interviewed. He talks about it all the time. People need to control their own shit, get in control of get your money right, get your resources right, get your education right, get the information that you need, and stop looking at what other people are doing or what other people are saying, especially people that you disagree with, and then reacting to everything that they do. Because where is that going to get you? All it's going to do is perpetuate the cycle. We're going to be doing the same thing. We're protesting and rioting. Listen, we were protesting in the 1960s. How is it 2020 and we still got the same response when something happens that we don't like? How is that? The new form of protesting is hashtagging. The hashtag is the new protest. What is that actually doing? What result is being produced? There's a business coach by the name of Alex Sharp, and I heard him say this. He said, anytime you want to make sure something gets done, or if you look at something that you got done in your life that you're proud of, it included 3 specific elements. Number one, there was a clear outcome, a clear result. Number two, there was clear transparency. You knew when you were getting closer to a result. And number three, there was clear accountability. We knew who was responsible for making that result occur. So when we look at hashtagging and kneeling and protesting and rioting and talking our shit on our social media, what is the clear outcome? What outcome are we after? I'll wait. What is the transparency? How do we know we're getting closer to an outcome? Because every time something like this happens, all I see on social media is people saying the same thing happens over and over again. I'm tired of crying. I don't know what to say. I can't breathe. This is happening over and over again. It's the same thing every time. So obviously there's no transparency because we're not getting any closer to an outcome by doing these actions, yet people keep doing them. And number three, who's accountable? Who is responsible for making sure the outcome is achieved? Do you take accountability? I'm talking to you personally. Do you take responsibility for it happening? If not you, who? The question that needs to be asked is, another question, how many people actually want to hear what I just said? I mean, you tell me, if you're listening, how many people do you know who want to hear what I just said? This takes time and it takes effort. It takes personal discipline. Who wants to hear about those things? Who wants to hear that in order to get this outcome, you need time, effort, and personal discipline? How many people do you know who want to hear that? You cannot, ladies and gentlemen, hashtag and Instagram and tweet your way to power in this life. Not anything that lasts. Not anything with a strong foundation that won't fall apart. It will take real work by a collective of people who are of the same mind. We, and when I say we, I'm referring to anyone who's in this group that wants change from the type of things that happen to people like George Floyd and could happen to somebody else any other day. Whoever's in this group who wants something different from what we saw happen to George Floyd in Minnesota, we have to wake the fuck up and stop playing the same game every time something like this happens. We can't keep playing the same game. We were playing this game 60 years ago. We're still playing the same game. It's just moved on to the internet. If we keep playing the same game, y'all know the saying. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I don't know if I need to say anything else. Work on you again.